Have you ever noticed how some people stop treating you with respect as you grow older? It's almost as if experience and wisdom become invisible. Suddenly, your words don't matter as much, your opinions are brushed aside, and you're left wondering, when did the world stop listening? It stings, doesn't it? Especially after a lifetime of working hard, raising families, and building a foundation for others. You'd think that respect would come naturally with age. But here's the harsh truth, it doesn't. Not always. Maybe it's a dismissive comment at a family gathering, a doctor who doesn't listen, or a stranger who thinks they can talk down to you because of your age. These moments hit harder than we expect, leaving us questioning how to respond without losing our dignity. Today, we're not just talking about how unfair this can feel, we're doing something about it. I'm going to share 7 powerful strategies to handle people who don't respect you. Some might surprise you, and one in particular will flip everything you've been taught on its head. But first, let me ask you, have you ever stood up for yourself in silence and watched the energy shift in the room? If not, you're about to learn how powerful that can be. Silence. It's one of the most misunderstood forms of communication, yet it's also one of the most powerful tools you can use, especially when someone disrespects you. The world often tells us to speak up, defend ourselves, and prove our worth. But sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is the exact opposite. Have you ever experienced the power of silence? If not, let me tell you about a moment that changed everything for me. It happened during a family dinner, one of those loud, lively gatherings where opinions fly freely and overlap like competing radio stations. I was sharing a memory, a story that meant a lot to me, when a younger relative cut me off with a dismissive comment. You know the kind I'm talking about, the type that stings not because of what's said, but because it's clear they don't think your words matter. For a split second, I felt the familiar rush of emotions. Embarrassment, frustration, the urge to respond and set things straight. I could have argued back, demanded acknowledgement, or explained why my story was worth hearing. But instead I paused. I put down my fork, met their eyes, and said absolutely nothing. No anger, no defensiveness, just a calm, steady gaze. The room grew silent. Their smirk faltered, and you could see the shift happen right in front of you. It was almost as if they suddenly realized the weight of what they had said. I didn't have to raise my voice or explain myself. My silence spoke for me, louder and clearer than words ever could. That's when it hit me. Silence isn't weakness. It's not backing down or letting someone get away with bad behavior. Silence, when used intentionally, is strength. It forces the other person to confront their own actions without the distraction of your reaction. And most people aren't prepared for that kind of mirror being held up to them. You see, when someone disrespects you, they're usually expecting a reaction. They thrive on your frustration or defensiveness. They want to pull you into their energy, make you feel small, or provoke an argument. But when you meet their negativity with calm, unshakable silence, you throw them off balance. You take away their power. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone said something hurtful or dismissive, and you walked away wishing you'd handled it differently? Maybe you reacted emotionally only to regret it later. Or maybe you stayed silent but felt like you had let them win. Here's the truth. Not every battle is worth fighting, and not every comment deserves a reply. As we get older, we realize how precious our time and peace truly are. Why waste them on people who don't value either? But let me be clear, choosing silence doesn't mean you're letting things slide. It's about choosing where to place your energy. It's about standing firm in your dignity and showing that you won't be dragged down to their level. When you reclaim that power, you're not just protecting your peace, you're sending a message, I know my worth, and nothing you say can change that. I remember another moment when this lesson came into focus for me. I was standing in line at the pharmacy, waiting patiently, when a younger person behind me grew visibly impatient. They muttered something under their breath, loud enough for me to hear. Years ago, I would have spun around and snapped back. I would have felt the need to prove that I wasn't someone to be disrespected. But this time I chose differently. I stood there quietly, kept my gaze forward, and said nothing. My silence wasn't awkward or timid, it was deliberate. The space between their words and my lack of reaction grew heavy. Within seconds they stopped talking. They fidgeted uncomfortably, realizing their words had no effect. In that moment I felt stronger, not because I had won some battle, but because I had refused to give away my energy. I chose not to engage, and by doing so, I protected my peace. That's the thing about silence. It strips away the noise and exposes the truth. It makes people sit with what they've said and leaves them to deal with the weight of their own behavior. There's a beauty in letting silence do the talking. It says, I won't dignify this with a response. It tells the other person that their words don't have enough value to disrupt your peace. And for yourself, it becomes a reminder of your own power, a proof that you don't need to explain, defend, or engage in order to stay in control. This isn't about pretending nothing hurts or letting people walk all over you. It's about recognizing which battles are worth fighting and which ones aren't worth a second of your time. The silent stare isn't just a reaction, it's a statement. It's a reminder to yourself that your dignity is intact and that your value is not up for debate. The next time someone interrupts you, dismisses your ideas, or tries to push you into explaining yourself, resist the urge to argue. Take a deep breath, meet their eyes, and let the silence speak for you. You'll be surprised how much louder it speaks, and how much more empowered you'll feel in its wake. Let's talk about one of the most exhausting traps we fall into: feeling the need to justify our choices. Have you ever caught yourself explaining why you made a decision, hoping for approval that never comes? I've been there too, and let me tell you, it's a losing game. No matter how valid your reasons are, some people will always push back, question you, or even judge you for doing what's best for yourself. I learned this the hard way. A few years ago, I made the decision to stop hosting large family gatherings. For years, I had been the one to bring everyone together: Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays. It was a tradition, but it was also draining. I loved my family, but the endless planning, cooking, and cleaning left me exhausted, physically and emotionally. Finally, I decided it was time to step back and take care of myself. That's when the question started. But why? Don't you love having everyone together? What about tradition? Are you sure you're not being selfish? At first, I felt compelled to explain. I told them it had become too much for me, that I needed to prioritize my health and well-being. But no matter what I said, it didn't seem to be enough. Their questions kept coming, each one loaded with just a hint of judgment. Then something clicked. I realized that their understanding wasn't necessary for my decision to be valid. I didn't need their permission to live my life the way that felt right for me. So, the next time someone asked, "Why aren't you hosting anymore?" I simply replied, "Because this is what works for me now." And then I said nothing more. Here's the twist: the conversation ended. Just like that. No debate. No further probing. The power of a short, confident response left them with nowhere to go. And I walked away feeling lighter, freer, like I had finally taken back control of my own life. You see, when you stop explaining yourself, you're doing more than just conserving your energy. You're sending a powerful message: I trust my own judgment and I don't need anyone else's approval. That's a radical shift in thinking, especially for those of us who've spent a lifetime trying to please others. But let's be honest, this strategy might ruffle some feathers. Some people won't like it when you stop explaining your choices. They're used to you bending over backward to justify yourself, and when you stop playing that game, they won't know how to react. That's okay. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Let me give you another example, a bit more controversial, but one that hits home for many people. A close friend of mine decided, at the age of 70, to sell her house and move into a smaller, more manageable apartment in a different city. It was a bold move, one that many people didn't understand. Her children questioned her. Why would you leave the house you've lived in for 40 years? Don't you think it's a bad idea at your age? At first, she tried to explain her decision. She talked about how the house had become too big for her, how the upkeep was overwhelming, and how she wanted a fresh start. But every explanation only invited more questions. They weren't really listening. They were just looking for reasons to convince her she was wrong. So she stopped explaining. The next time someone asked her why she was moving, she simply said, "Because it's what feels right for me." And that was it. Guess what? She sold the house, moved into her cozy new apartment, and never looked back. It was the best decision she'd ever made, and she didn't need anyone else's validation to prove it. Here's the point. You don't owe anyone an explanation for how you choose to live your life. Whether it's saying no to an invitation, making a career change, or deciding to prioritize your own happiness, your choices are your own. They don't need to be justified or packaged neatly for others to accept. The next time someone questions your decision, try this. Instead of offering a long-winded explanation, give a short, confident answer. Say something like, "Because I want to," or "It felt right for me." Then let the silence fill the space. You'll be amazed at how powerful that feels, and how few people know how to respond to such certainty. Here's something to reflect on. How much time have you spent explaining yourself to people who never really cared about your reasons in the first place? What would happen if, just for once, you let your decision stand without explanation? I know what would happen. You'd feel free. You'd feel strong. And you'd take one more step toward reclaiming the life that's truly yours. Sometimes the most powerful way to handle people who don't respect you isn't with words or silence. It's with distance. It may sound harsh, but it's one of the most effective forms of self-care. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table, and as you grow older, you realize just how precious your time and energy truly are. There's no rule that says you must endure disrespect just to keep the peace. Yet, for many of us, the idea of stepping back from certain people feels uncomfortable, even wrong. Maybe it's a family member, a longtime friend, or a neighbor you've known for years. You tell yourself, they don't mean any harm, even though every interaction leaves you feeling drained or diminished. I've been there. I had a close friend, someone I had known for decades, who had a knack for turning every conversation into a critique. My choices, my hobbies, even the clothes I wore were fair game for her thinly veiled advice. At first, I brushed it off, telling myself she didn't mean it. But after every coffee date or phone call, I found myself feeling smaller, questioning my own decisions. One day, after yet another comment that stung more than it should have, I had a moment of clarity. Why am I allowing this to continue? What am I gaining from this relationship? The answer was nothing. So I made a quiet decision. I didn't confront her or make a big announcement. I simply started creating distance. I stopped answering every call. I politely declined a few invitations. Slowly, the weight that she had brought into my life began to lift. Here's the twist. It wasn't just her behavior that changed, it was mine. With that space, I saw everything more clearly. Her constant criticism had never been about me. It was about her own insecurities, her own need to feel superior. But most importantly, I realized that I didn't need to carry that burden anymore. The truth is, keeping your distance isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect. It's a way of telling yourself that your peace matters, that your well-being comes first. Now, don't get me wrong. Distance doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need to slam doors or burn bridges. Sometimes it's as simple as quietly stepping back. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you're not as available as you used to be. You're allowed to prioritize your happiness over someone else's feelings. Let me give you a real-world example that may surprise you. I once knew a woman who decided to stop attending her extended family's holiday gatherings altogether. For years, these gatherings had been a source of constant tension. Certain relatives would take every opportunity to belittle her, questioning her choices, and making hurtful comments in front of others. Finally, she had enough. One year, she simply didn't show up. No explanation, no apology. At first, it caused a stir. Relatives called, demanding to know why she wasn't there. She remained polite but firm. I needed to do what was best for me. Here's where it gets interesting. After the initial shock wore off, something changed. The next time she saw those relatives, their behavior toward her was different. More respectful, almost careful. It was as if her absence had sent a message they couldn't ignore. I won't tolerate being treated this way. It's not always easy to create distance, especially when it involves people you care about. But the truth is, some relationships aren't meant to last forever. And that's okay. Every step back you take creates room for positivity, for relationships that nurture rather than drain, and for experiences that bring you joy. Ask yourself this: what am I gaining by staying close to someone who doesn't respect me? If the answer is nothing, it might be time to take a step back. Remember, distance isn't about punishing anyone, it's about protecting yourself. It's a boundary, a line in the sand that says, my time and energy are valuable and I choose to spend them wisely. The people who truly care about you will understand that. And those who don't? Well, maybe it's time to let them fade into the background where they belong. There's a quiet power in walking through life with your head held high. It's not just about posture or confidence. It's about embodying your self-worth with every step you take. When someone disrespects you, the temptation is often to shrink, to retreat into yourself, or to lash out in anger. But holding your head high is a reminder, to yourself and to others, that you know exactly who you are, and nothing they say or do can take that away from you. Years ago, I found myself in a situation that tested this idea in a way I'll never forget. I was at a casual gathering when someone made an offhand comment about my age. One of those remarks disguised as humor but tinged with condescension. "Oh, you probably don't keep up with things like that anymore," they said with a smirk, as if my age had somehow made me irrelevant. In the past, I might have laughed it off, or worse, tried to prove them wrong by listing all the things I did keep up with. But this time, something inside me shifted. I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and smiled, a calm, steady smile that spoke volumes. Then I continued the conversation as if their comment had no power over me. Here's the twist: it worked. Not because I outsmarted them or came up with the perfect retort, but because my confidence disarmed them. Their comment fell flat, and they quickly moved on, unsettled by the fact that I hadn't given them the reaction they were looking for. That's the thing about confidence. It's magnetic. When you walk into a room with your head held high, people notice. It's not arrogance, it's quiet assurance. It says, "I know who I am and I'm proud of it." And the best part? The more you practice it, the less other people's negativity will affect you. But holding your head high doesn't mean you're unaffected. It's not about pretending you're invincible or acting like nothing bothers you. It's about choosing not to let someone else's words take root in your spirit. When someone tries to undermine you, they're usually hoping to see you falter. They want you to doubt yourself. But when you remain steady, it throws them off balance. Let me share another moment that drives this home. I once met a woman named Linda who had spent years working in a competitive corporate environment. She was highly respected, but as she got older, she noticed that her younger colleagues began to treat her differently. They would talk over her in meetings, dismiss her ideas, and act as though her experience no longer mattered. At first, Linda felt frustrated. She tried harder to prove her worth, explaining her decisions in painstaking detail and fighting for every ounce of respect. But the more she fought, the more they seemed to dismiss her. Then one day she changed her approach. Instead of pushing back, she leaned into her experience and let her actions speak for themselves. When someone interrupted her, she paused, held her head high, and calmly said, "I'll finish what I was saying, and then you can respond." When her ideas were ignored, she didn't beg for attention. She simply stood by them with confidence. And here's the magic: it worked. Over time, her colleagues began to treat her with the respect she had always deserved. They saw her not as someone trying to prove herself, but as someone who already knew her value. Holding your head high isn't about winning an argument or proving a point. It's about walking through life with dignity and strength, knowing that your worth isn't tied to anyone else's opinion. It's a daily act of self-respect, a way of reminding yourself that you deserve to take up space, to be heard, and to be seen, just as you are. The next time someone tries to make you feel small, resist the urge to stoop to their level. Take a deep breath, lift your chin, and remind yourself, "I am more than their words. I am enough." In that moment, you'll feel your power return, not because of what you said, but because of who you are. Respect isn't always given freely. Sometimes it has to be taught. The way people treat you is often a reflection of what you've allowed in the past. If you've spent years brushing off little slights or excusing rude behavior, it's no surprise when those behaviors continue. But here's the good news: it's never too late to set new boundaries and show people how you expect to be treated. I once had a neighbor who loved to drop by unannounced. At first it seemed harmless, a quick chat here, a cup of coffee there. But it started happening more and more. They'd show up in the middle of the afternoon when I was resting or interrupt my evenings without notice. Every time I told myself, they mean well, but the truth was, it left me feeling frustrated and drained. Finally, after one too many surprise visits, I knew something had to change. When they knocked on my door the next time, I greeted them with a warm smile but gently said, "I always enjoy our chats, but I'd appreciate it if you could call ahead next time to make sure it's a good time for me." For a moment they looked surprised, maybe even a little taken aback. But then they nodded and said, "Of course, I didn't mean to intrude." From that day on, they respected my time, and I learned an important lesson. People won't always know your boundaries until you set them. Setting boundaries doesn't have to be confrontational. It can be as simple as calmly asserting yourself when someone crosses a line. For example, if someone interrupts you, you can say, "Please let me finish what I was saying." Someone makes a thoughtless comment about your choices, respond with, "That's your opinion, but I'm happy with my decision." These aren't confrontational statements, they're declarations of your worth, spoken with calm authority. But here's the twist. Some people won't take kindly to your newfound boundaries. They'll test you, push back, or try to guilt you into backing down. That's where your strength comes in. Teaching people how to treat you isn't about demanding respect or forcing anyone to see your value. It's about calmly, consistently showing where your boundaries lie and standing firm when they're tested. I once knew a woman named Margaret who faced this exact challenge. She had spent most of her life saying yes to everyone, friends, family, co-workers, because she didn't want to disappoint anyone. But deep down, it left her feeling resentful and burned out. One day, after yet another request that stretched her too thin, she did something she had never done before. She said no. At first, the person on the other end didn't take it well. "But why?" they demanded. "Can't you just make an exception?" Margaret could feel the familiar pull to explain herself, to justify her no, to soften the blow. But instead, she took a deep breath and calmly said, "I'm sorry, but I can't. I need to take care of myself." Here's what happened next. The world didn't fall apart. The person didn't cut her out of their life. In fact, after the initial surprise, they began to respect her more. They realized that Margaret's time and energy were valuable, and from then on, they thought twice before making unreasonable demands. This is the magic of teaching people how to treat you. It starts with small steps, asserting your boundaries in everyday situations. Over time, those small steps add up, and you find yourself surrounded by people who respect you not because you demanded it, but because you showed them how. Let me ask you, how many times have you stayed silent or gone along with something just to keep the peace? What would happen if, just once, you calmly but firmly spoke your truth? I'll tell you what would happen. You'd feel lighter, stronger, more in control of your life than ever before. And the best part? The people who truly care about you will rise to meet your new standards. The rest? Well, they'll either learn to adjust or fade away. At the heart of everything we've talked about today lies one undeniable truth. Respect starts with you. It's not just about how others treat you, it's about how you treat yourself. When you hold yourself in high regard, when you honor your own needs and boundaries, you set the tone for how others will engage with you. I'll be honest with you, this isn't always easy. There was a time in my life when I constantly put others first, bending over backward to keep everyone happy. I said yes when I wanted to say no. I took on tasks I didn't have the energy for. I attended events I didn't enjoy, all because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. But each time I did, I chipped away at my own self-respect. It wasn't until I started listening to that small, quiet voice inside me, the one that said, "You matter too," that things began to change. Respecting yourself can feel revolutionary, especially in a world that often asks us to sacrifice our own well-being for the sake of others. But here's the beauty of it. The more you practice self-respect, the more natural it becomes. You'll start to notice that the people who once pushed your boundaries now pause and think twice. You'll find that relationships that once drained you will either transform or fade away altogether. And here's the twist that catches many by surprise. When you respect yourself unapologetically, you attract more respect from others. It's like a ripple effect. People begin to mirror the way you carry yourself. If you treat yourself with care and compassion, they're more likely to do the same. But here's something important to remember. Self-respect doesn't mean perfection. It's not about having all the answers or never making mistakes. It's about treating yourself with kindness when you stumble and celebrating yourself when you succeed. It's about recognizing that your worth isn't tied to what you do for others or how much you accomplish. It's inherent in who you are. So take a moment to ask yourself, am I treating myself the way I want others to treat me? If the answer is no, that's okay. Start small. Make one decision today that honors your worth, and then another tomorrow. Before you know it, those small decisions will add up and you'll feel a renewed sense of strength and freedom. Because at the end of the day, respect, true, lasting respect, always begins with you. When you honor yourself, everything else falls into place. Your decisions become clearer. Your relationships become healthier. And the noise of disrespect that once seemed so loud begins to fade, replaced by the quiet confidence of knowing your own worth. As we journey through life, especially in our later years, the importance of respect takes on a deeper meaning. It's not just about how others treat us, it's about the relationship we cultivate with ourselves. Every boundary you set, every moment you protect your peace, and every time you choose silence over unnecessary battles becomes a powerful declaration of your worth. You've lived long enough to know that not every comment deserves a response, not every battle is worth fighting, and not every person deserves access to your life. So stand tall in your truth. Walk with your head held high. Speak calmly but firmly when necessary. And most importantly, never doubt that you deserve to be treated with kindness, dignity, and respect. Not because of what you've done, but simply because of who you are. You've earned the right to live authentically, unapologetically, and with unwavering dignity. And as you do, you'll find that the respect you give yourself becomes a guiding light, shaping the way others see and treat you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Take a moment to reflect and share one thing you've learned today. How do you plan to embrace these lessons in your own life? Leave a comment below. I'll be reading every one. If this video resonated with you, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life on your own terms.